Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Northfield. My name is Ellen Saul. My partner, John Bessie, and I found UUFN online in the midst of COVID and became members almost 3 years ago at the first Together worship service out in the parking lot. We are incredibly grateful to be part of this community. From the start, we felt welcomed as we are. We treasure that we get to be part of love and connection with all of you in the midst of this precious earth and the vastness of spirit. UUFN is an inclusive community that nurtures spiritual and intellectual growth and fosters ethical and social responsibility. If you are a visitor, either on site or online, we are glad you are with us, and we invite you to stay after the service to get acquainted. We welcome your questions and look forward to getting to know you. Later in the service today, we will take our Share the Plate offering as a way to care for the wider world. Each month, we share our offering with an organization that embodies UU values in the world. This month's recipient is UU The Vote, which is responding to the urgent need for a free and fair election with wide participation this November. UU The Vote is a nonpartisan initiative to engage our neighbors, mobilize voters, rally around key ballot initiatives, and engage in spiritually grounded, values-based issue conversations. There is so much at stake in this election cycle. UU The Vote equips and empowers thousands to strengthen the democratic process in the United States. Together, we can work toward building a truly inclusive democracy. During the offering later, you may put cash or a check in the basket or donate online from our website, uunorthfield.org. If you're paying your pledge by check, please note in the memo line either capital pledge or annual pledge. There will also be instructions on the screen during the offertory time. I call your attention to the announcements in your order of service and weekly email. There you'll find more information about the following. UU is hiring. Please spread the word that we are looking for a new religious education coordinator. Immediately after the service today, please join in the newcomer and birthday celebration. We will serve cake to everyone in attendance in honor of the 16 members who have a summer birthday. After that, all are invited to a fun Get Acquainted session in the church. Interested in learning more about how the Enneagram can be a tool for personal and spiritual growth? Join co-facilitators John Owens and Mary Jane Lipinski downstairs after the service on August 11th. Join us next Sunday, also August 11th, for The Power of Three, the light, the warmth, and the fire with Paul Krauss. Paul will show how the light of truth, the warmth of community, and the fire of commitment can be powerful forces in our lives. Again, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Northfield. Thank you, Taylor. We have a special gift this morning, the chance to welcome Ralph Waldo Emerson into our UUFN community. Wendell Refior has stepped up to be the bridge for us, reenacting one of Emerson's sermons in the costume of the period. For over 20 years, Wendell has shared his insights and passion for the inspiring idealism in Emerson's great essays and addresses, performing in solo appearances and historical reenactments across Southern New England following Emerson's 2003 bicentennial. As you can see in your insert, Emerson lived a long, long time ago. FYI, he lived in a time when the pronoun he had to make do to represent all of us, and when a sermon shorter than 90 minutes just didn't cut it. Happily, part of Wendell's genius is his ability to condense Emerson's inspiration into a size which we can take in during our regular service length. I asked Wendell for the story of his connection to Emerson, and here's what he told me. Experiencing a midlife crisis and wanting to reclaim his energy for service to others, Wendell began reading the founding documents of Unitarian Universalism and came across Emerson's Divinity School address. Wendell was astonished to find that Emerson was saying things Wendell thought were revolutionary in the 1960s and was able to say them without using religious language. With joy, he concluded, I can do this. I can study Emerson and teach and grow and learn. When he witnessed a man reenacting Thoreau, he knew he could step into Emerson and give us an experience of him, one of the founders of UU. And that was the start. So it is with my great pleasure, friends and neighbors, to present Ralph Waldo Emerson. Let's give him a big welcome.
Members, friends, and visitors, I call you to worship today with these words. A person will worship something, have no doubt about that. We may think that our tribute is paid in secret in the dark recesses of our heart, but it will out. That which dominates our imagination and our thoughts will determine our lives and character. Therefore, it behooves us to be careful what we worship, for what we are worshiping, we are becoming. Let us worship.
The flaming chalice is the symbol of Unitarian Universalism. Each Sunday, when we gather, we bring this symbol to life together. Please join me in speaking the words for the lighting of the chalice. Let us open our eyes to see what is beautiful. Let us open our minds to learn what is true. Let us open our hearts to love one another. Please rise in body or spirit. For our opening hymn, we sing of Golden Mornings, number 44. Please note the words of this hymn were written by Ralph Waldo Emerson. You know he grew up where there was snow, right? All right. So let us move into our time of centering and connection. Spirit of life, draw near. Help us to become more aware of a greater love shimmering within and among us. Will you take a breath with me? In the presence of a love that holds us all, we use our chalice flame to light our candles of community. We light our first candle as a blessing for the wider world. During this time of political uncertainty, many of us have trouble knowing how to respond. Let us strive to respond to name-calling with respectful discourse, lies with truth, and hatred with love. We know too that the details of our daily lives are sacred and important. We now light a candle for all the simple joys that are sustaining us. And we light another candle in honor of the sorrows and hardships we might be carrying. One more candle in honor of the joys and sorrows we carry in our hearts, but that have not been spoken aloud. And we move into a time of silence. May the truth of your heart be reflected in these flames. I invite you to settle into a silence of your understanding, holding the truth of our lives and of the world in our hearts. Amen, and blessed be. Our first reading today is from the Free Mind, responsive reading 592 by Reverend William Ellery Channing, one of Emerson's teachers. I call that mind free, which masters the senses and which recognizes its own reality and greatness. I call that mind free, which jealously guards its intellectual rights and powers. I call that mind free, which is not passively framed by outward circumstances and is not the creature of accidental impulse. I call that mind free, which protects itself against the usurpations of society and which does not cower to human opinion. Our second reading today is from the Transcendentalist Address, delivered by Mr. Emerson in 1842. What are called, quote, new views, unquote, are not new, but the very oldest of thoughts cast into the mold of these new times. What is popularly called transcendentalism among us is idealism as it appears in 1842. As thinkers, mankind have been ever divided into two sects, materialists and idealists. The first class founding on experience, the second on consciousness. The first class beginning to think from the data of the senses. The second class perceive that the senses are not final and say the senses give us representations of things. The idealist insists on the power of thought and of will, on inspiration, on miracle, on individual culture. We will now expand our circle of care as we gratefully give and receive our Share the Plate offering for You the Vote. This is one way we make our care for the world tangible. Will the ushers please come forward?
Greetings. Members and friends of this Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Northfield, I wish to speak to you today about human culture, the aim, basis, and scope of human culture, that is, cultivating man himself. Even a brief survey of human history reveals the progress of man. The ideas which predominate in one period are simply accepted by the next age, which then endeavors to express its own ideas. An attentive observer will see that the aims and tone are now entirely changed. If he compares the institutions and books of the present age with those of any former period, ancient Greece or Elizabethan England, men of old acted and spoke as if the aim of man should be the prosperity of his society or his nation. They compromised the individual to the nation. Today, the modern mind teaches, at least in its extremes, teaches that the nation exists for the individual, for the guardianship and education for the guardianship and education of every man. The Great Reformation contained the new thought. The English Revolution was its expansion. The American Declaration of Independence was the formal announcement of the new idea by one nation to all nations. The vote or universal suffrage and the attack upon slavery are other examples. Statesmen who once demanded prerogative for themselves and for the rich, now campaign for the poor. At last, science has been adopted by the nations. The throne of England abandons war and pursues engineering. Finally, humor returns, and then wit comes in. The crown sends its best men beyond the region of the Eskimos to the deadly cold of the North Pole. Large assemblies of men no longer bow to the rich. Their cry is for, heard from some legislatures, is for education. This, my friends, is the overview of the growth of the new idea in modern history. Of course, in the mind of the philosopher, it has far more precision and has already attained great depth and splendor. To the philosopher, the individual has ceased to be regarded as merely a part and has come to be regarded as a whole being. He is the world. For ages, the individual man was deemed a mere appendage to a farm, to a trade, to an army, or to the state. Now he discovers that property and trade, government and geography, nay, the globe itself and all its parts are but counterparts to the mighty faculties that dwell peacefully in his own mind. Thus, it is merely a state of disease that makes him appear to be only a servant. He exists, the man exists, and the world exists to him in a new relation of subject and object. Neither one is valid alone, and only in their marriage do they have creative life. As yet, the new idea has no clearer name than culture, human culture. And culture's pathway is the related nature of man. Natural objects address him. A flower evokes a smile. A stone crystal invites wonder at the laws of the universe. In the philosophic view, human culture, we look at things in a new point of view. The popular view looks mainly at things themselves. The philosophic view goes further to their effects on the beholder. This is the progress of man, respecting things for their relation to the soul, for their intrinsic and universal effects on the soul. This I attribute to culture. Human culture, with its new views of man, will remold our metaphysics and our science, our theology, law, and all the professions, and as they earnestly create the new, they must modify or destroy the old. His own culture, the unfolding of man's nature, is the chief aim of man. A divine impulse at the core of his being propels him to this end. It is the only motive at all commensurate with his force. It is the ambition to discover himself by exercising his latent power. Compared to this, all trades and occupations are quite subordinate. True culture, the unfolding of man's nature, requires a discipline so universal that it teaches no part of man was made in vain. However, most men are only partial. We see men whose emotive faculties, men whose intellectual or moral faculties still lie dormant. Hence the philosopher laments to see the inaction of man's higher faculties. He laments to see a man poor who is able to work, to see men blind who have beauty that see on every side. The philosopher regrets imbalance. For example, is it impossible for a man to love mathematics and Shakespeare? He regrets that anyone depends on others for his faith or for his political and religious opinions or holds to the past. From all these oppressions, it is the purpose of a wise culture to redeem the soul. Indeed, a wise culture can redeem man's soul. Is it not possible to clear and disencumber a man of 1,000 causes of his unhappiness, to show him that he has but one interest in the world, his own character? Why should he be a dependent? Why a pretender? When the man himself is his own commander, then he has reality. Culture in the high sense must so present the attractions of nature to the man that his slumbering attributes burst out of their sleep and rush into the day. The effect of culture on the man will not be like a little trimming and grooming. No, my friends, human culture is educating the eye to the harmony of the world, seeing a true harmony that includes the roughest landscape, horrid thickets, dense swamps, and bald mountain, seeing the balance of the land and the sea. But what is the foundation on which so vast an ambition rests? How dare we think so highly of man in the face of the miserable world? In the face of all history, which seems to record nothing but savage and semi-savage life, in the face of the materialistic nations. Today, no man puts much confidence in the virtue of others, scarcely in the virtue of the select few pure souls among us. Who can reconcile this view or lofty view or ambition with the faces of the mob of men seen standing on street corners? I say, the basis of culture is that part of human nature which in philosophy is called the ideal. A human being always compares any action or object with something he calls the perfect or the ideal. That is to say, not with any action or object now existing in nature, but with a certain better existing in his mind. That better we call the ideal. The ideal is not opposed to real. The ideal is not opposed to real, but to actual. The ideal is the real. The actual is but the apparent and the temporary. Ideal justice is justice, not the imperfect compensation we can attain by courts and juries. As the mathematicians say, there is no perfect circle in nature, and their reasonings are not true of any actual any actual circle existing in nature, but only the ideal circle. Human culture is the universal presence of the vision of the better in all parts of life. I hold this, the ideal in the mind, as the signal and most important characteristic of human nature, the most important characteristic. Now, what does the ideal in the mind reveal about the state of society. Me. And alas, there is no part of society that conforms to its laws. Such a man, upright, reasoning, a royal man with a master of his lower instincts, cannot be found. Our deformed society does not aim at an ideal integrity. It no longer believes it possible and only aims weakly at keeping down the universal uproar and keeping men from each other's throats. Thus, the great endeavors are paralyzed. A universal principle of compromise has crept in. Routine. Routine dominates, a routine which no man created and no man holds himself accountable for its abuses. And yet it tyrannizes. It tyrannizes the spontaneous will and character of all individuals. The result is a loss of faith. And the loss of faith is the chief mischief. We are overpowered by the great actual, saying, this is the way of the world, it is necessary. Most men simply accept the yoke and accommodate their feet to the treadmill. How dare anyone refuse this yoke, cries society. Art thou wiser than the public? Art thou wiser than the whole world? In contrast, the idealist replies, all the worth that resides in all existing institutions is but the fruit of the effort upon effort of the instinct of the ideal to embody itself in the world. Now, beyond the aim, scope, and scope of culture, I proceed to how to measure an advanced culture. What yardstick or ruler can assess the harmony of our relation to the universe? What yardstick? I say proportion. Proportion certainly is the great end of human culture. Like a philosopher, a man should seek to give everything and every being in the universe its just measure of importance. There are two ways of cultivating a sense of proportion, and these shape and define character. The first way is adopting the habit of attending to all our sensations and putting ourselves in a wide variety of places, such as visiting theaters, prisons, palaces, parliaments, churches, museums, and factories. Why not man-made spectacles and man-made hells? But this is impossible for too many. Perhaps impossible except superficially, because a man is not in the place to which he goes unless his mind is there also. And suppose a man goes to all such places and many more, will he have seen it all? Will he know the full extent of the powers of man? The second mode of cultivating proportion is to develop finer gradations in our perceptions. To form such a scale for judging events and things, one should notice and compare the depth of thought to which each object appeals in the mind. Nature and the course of things will surely supply every man with a sufficient variety of objects and events to mark the divisions of a just scale of measurement. Beyond circumstances, proportion is a habit of mind. The truth is, the mind is the perfect measure of all things and the only measure. Yet I acknowledge the mind is also distorting. The mind is a distorting medium as long as its aims are not pure. But the moment a man declares his independence, and takes his life into his own hand and sets forth on the quest of culture, then the love of truth is a sufficient gauge. It is clear he can have no other. For what external standard, what authority can teach the paramount rank of truth and justice, but the mind's own instinct? Who shall tell it the claim of other things but affection and need and the incessant oracles of the ideal? Now, since I so respect the ideal in the mind, I must here confess. My toleration does not increase for those who do not revere their own mind. I say that man is a skeptic. Alas, it is not he who denies a miracle that is a skeptic. No, that man is a skeptic who denies it's his absolute duty to speak the truth, or pretends not to know how to discriminate between duty and mere inclination. The skeptic refuses to believe the mind is an adequate measure of things as they are. With such views of human culture, I turn to the transcendent promises of culture. I think this: the great enterprise fallen to us from the heavens as our lot in the present age. I think the time has come to ask the question, why are there no heroes? Why is not every man that venerable? Why should any be vulgar or vile? Therefore, I wish that education should not be entrusted to feeble hands. We should speak to the individual that which he ought to hear, the voice of faith and the voice of truth. I wish him to perceive that his imitation, his dependency, his fear are but child's clothes, and it's time for him to cast them off and live by his own vows. I wish him to stop following those with famous names. Let him know that these are only marks and footnotes for his guidance, lending some hope for his own progress. I do believe that no man has come into this world whose power and potential are not new or not needed. No one is not new or not needed. Whoever is alive may be good and wise. I wish him to adopt this purpose with a great heart, to lay himself generously open to the influences of heaven and earth. Let him survey his instincts and faculties. Let him ask if a man's body is designed merely for the taste of sugar, salt, and drink. Let him examine his senses and his use of them. Let him ask if justice has been done to the great instincts of his active powers and his mind. Let him explore the intellect and the enchanted ground of the affections and see if he has appropriated their health and their sweetness. Let him learn the higher disciplines of the heroic and ascend to the study and practice of virtue, the practice of virtue. In conclusion, my friends, I have dropped my sounding line into the deep and several districts of human nature to report what I see. Yet I do not understand the difficulties. I do not underestimate the difficulties of the task, and I see the utter incompetency of one mind to complete the complete chart of human nature. For my part, I will always rely on the inexhaustible ideal. I still trust that confidence can be inspired in the powers of the will, in the aspirations for the better, by the voice, by the faith of one believing man. I came to inspire hope, and I shall consider it a high success if anyone has perceived their scope has been extended, their confidence fortified, or finds that more has been suggested to their imagination than the words I have said today.
Thank you, Mr. Emerson. We will go forth from here with lots to think about. Thank you. And imagination ready to speak to us. Our closing hymn today is Voice Still and Small, number 391, and we will sing it through twice.
Go forth into the world, and may you be sustained, and may you care for the world. No one is not needed. No one was made in vain. All are needed, each one.
We join in the words for extinguishing our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Please rise in body or spirit, and with your hands over your heart or holding a hand of those next to you, or whatever posture is most comfortable for you, we sing words of blessing one to another. May the Lord, our sun, shine upon you. All love surround you, and the pure light that's within you. Guide your way home. May the long-time sun shine upon you. All love surround you, and the pure light that's within you. Guide your way home. Mr. Emerson will be available after the service to answer questions about his life and beliefs. He's even indicated he's willing to do selfies. Birthday cake will be served now while people visit, and chairs are arranged for the newcomer activity. Let's go in peace and sing happy birthday.